and answer live stream with Dr. Vitti from Detroit Public Schools School District. We will be answering your questions about what Governor Whitmer's executive order to close Michigan schools for the remainder of the year means for students. My name is Daniel Rizzo, and I'm a senior at Western International High School, as well as a member of 482 Forward's Youth Organizing Collective. And a little preface, 482 Forward is an education justice organizing group, and our goal is to fight for better schools for Detroit students. And of course, that means our slogan is nothing about us without us, because we want to make sure students get the chance to voice their opinions and also make sure that they get heard. And also during this, we're going to try to get answers about what the school closures means and impacts everyone else.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ellie Vasquez, and I'm a student at Cass Tech. I represent Congress of Communities on 482 Youth Collective. Together, Daniel and I will be hosting this conversation with Dr. Vitti. We've also got a couple other students and adults on the line who will be helping monitor the questions. We receive and may chime in from time to time. And I want to give a shout out for the Youth Collective and Metro Detroit Equity Fellow members who are managing our social medias and live streams so you guys can see this today. Thank you, Serbi, Jesus, Naja, Andrea, Sunidi, Lindsay, Molly, and Dylan. Our goal with this conversation is to be able to bring clarity and transparency regarding what comes next for Detroit students. We know that COVID-19, or also known as coronavirus outbreak, has been stressful on everyone, and we hope you and your family are staying safe. To access resources related to educational health, basic needs, and or food during the coronavirus crisis, you can go to covid313.org.
All right, so we got to make sure that this Q&A session goes smoothly. So some ground rules: please keep the discussion respectful and civil, especially in the chat. No oppressive, discriminatory language, or name calling. Please don't be a troll. This is very important for us and for people trying to figure out what's truly happening out there and what's going to be happening to us. Please keep to the topic of discussion. And if you comment or post, try to make it unique or original to the conversation in order to be respectful to all of the participants and to those help monitoring the Q&A. Of course, we also reserve the right to remove or block someone from the live feed for violating these policies at our discretion for any reason and at any time. And finally, please keep Instagram's community standards and terms and policies in mind, because we're trying to keep the stream up and we don't want to accidentally get banned.
Thank you. If you're joining us, this is a live question and answer session with Dr. Vitti of the DPSCD School District. We'll be discussing what the governor's executive order closing schools for the remainder of the year means for students and what will be happening with education moving forward. Dr. Vitti is the superintendent for Detroit Public Schools Community District, or DPSCD. A school superintendent's job is to oversee daily operations and strategic long-term planning of a school district and to supervise school principals and staff. Finally, the superintendent of a district is in charge of making financial decisions along with elected school boards. Dr. Vitti joined DPSCD in 2017. Dr. Vitti, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what your job is like here in Detroit?
I love my job. I am the general superintendent. I was selected by 7 elected officials. This is the first time the school board has been elected and empowered for over a decade. The district was run by an emergency manager who was appointed by previous governors. We have done a lot in a short amount of time, but so much more work needs to be done. Previous to being superintendent of Detroit, I was superintendent in Jacksonville, Florida. I was the chief academic officer in Miami. I was a principal in Miami, principal leader in Miami. I worked for the Florida Department of Education for school turnaround and school improvement. I was a principal in Miami. I was also a dean of discipline in New York City in the Bronx. I was a teacher in the Bronx, and I was a teacher in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, all before becoming a teacher. I grew up in Metro Detroit, and this is home for me, so it is an honor to be your superintendent at this time and hopefully for a while.
All right, thank you for sharing that. It sounds like you've got your hands full for right now. And we're wondering, when do you get to interact with DPSCD students, and what do you like being able to interact with us?
So the reason why I agreed to this is because I think the feedback is important. My engagement is important. Obviously, I try to use email, social media, mainly Twitter, to interact with students. But I think direct interaction is important because it allows me to test my ideas, my thinking, and to get feedback from students. I serve you as superintendent, and I don't think I'm always right. I don't think I'm by far perfect, but I try to lead in a way that's child-centric and about what is best for children. And so every time I have a chance to meet with students, especially high school students, in small groups, I try to do that. I had been, prior to the shutdown, meeting with high school students every month at the Fisher Building, where we ask high school principals to pick 1 to 3 students every month, and we just go around the room talking about what's working, what's not, and what needs to be done differently. But I especially enjoy working with 482 Forward because I feel as if the students are organized, visionary, hardworking, articulate, and passionate. And I learn from them, and hopefully they learn from me. But I don't think you can be a leader if you don't touch in with the people that you serve, and I'm here to serve students.
Thank you. Let's get into what's on everyone's mind right now: coronavirus and its effects on our education. What has the DPSCD district done to respond to COVID-19 so far?
Well, we were one of the first districts. I was one of the first superintendent to call for schools to be closed, and I did that not because I know how important school is for students, and I know how important direct instruction is, and I know that our students want to gain credits and move forward with graduation as fast as they can. At the same time, my primary responsibility as superintendent is to ensure that students are safe. And although students are not the highest vulnerable population because of COVID-19, because typically our youth immune systems are stronger, there's still young people throughout the country that are sick, even a few that have passed away, but not as our older population. But with that said, high school students and students in general can be carriers, and they can carry the virus back home to where they may be living with grandparents and older individuals that are more susceptible to the virus. And we have employees that are in school. So when you have over hundreds of people congregating in one space, obviously a lot of germs are moved around, exposure is high. And looking at all the facts of the virus, I thought it was just not a safe environment for children and our employees and the greater community by having school. So the governor listened, and she suspended school twice, and then obviously today announced that schools would be closed for the rest of the year unless something dramatically changes. In the meantime, we have allowed students to have access to Khan Academy at the high school level for PSAT, SAT. We created academic packets for students in grades K through 8 in reading and math and printed those out. We also have an online access to iReady for reading and math at the K level, and Mayan for K-12 access to online books. That is not enough. And so now that we know we are going to be shut down for the rest of the year, we are working on a new online platform that will be accessible April 14th, where we're going to build off the curriculum that we're using in pre-K to 12th grade for reading, math, science, and social studies. There'll be lessons for everyday engagement. The lessons will be accompanied with a video recording of introducing the lesson and the assignment. And we're going to require teachers to have what's in college are called office hours, but there will be set aside time where teachers have to be accessible for students to answer questions about their assignment, maybe answer questions about college, answer questions about the assignments that they have, or just life in general. Our guidance counselors, our social workers are going to start to reach out to students, our principals and assistant principals. So we're going to start ramping up some of the online learning, and we're going to print all the materials as well, and they can be picked up either at your school or at the distribution centers where food is passed out right now, but that we'll figure out. I'm working on a plan to possibly give all families a tablet and internet access. So that we're still working through the details of that, but I'm hoping to be able to do that by the beginning of May or the middle or late part of May. And that will help the digital divide and access more students to the online materials. Right now, the materials and the assignments will be enrichment, just in order to keep learning ongoing, and not required unless we possibly may use the materials for extra credits if students aren't happy with their third quarter grade before the shutdown, but we're still working out those details. I'll go ahead and jump in because I know that there were questions about this up front. We're probably going to look at seniors graduating based on credits before the shutdown. So whatever credits were required minus the second semester is what we would use likely for graduation criteria. And possibly forgive credit towards students who are working on that last semester in addition to what was required. But we're going to do everything we can not to use the virus be the obstacle to graduating at the end of this year. And then for students from 6th to 11th grade, subtracting the required credits for the last semester to allow promotion to occur, and that would continue into the future, so you're not in a position to have to make things up. And then relying basically on the academic path that you were on. If you were on a path to be promoted to the next grade before the shutdown, then you would be promoted. That's our thinking right now. I know a lot of students want to get into the buildings. After the shelter in place is lifted, then we'll create a system to allow students to come and empty out their lockers or get anything out of their classrooms. And then lastly, it's likely that prom and graduation ceremonies will be postponed. We're looking at maybe summer, early fall. We know how important those events are, and we want to continue them. Right now, we don't have a mechanism to reimburse students for fees that they paid, and those fees still may be used for graduation and prom. As a district, we're going to try to pay for the prom and the graduation ceremony, so that would allow all the money to be reimbursed. But at the end of the day, if we don't have the events, then the money will be reimbursed, but we're possibly going to reimburse the funds just because of this tragedy and just try to pay for it ourselves as a district or philanthropically and private means. So we'll work that out. Obviously, people aren't in school to process those checks, but we will get that money back to students and families.
Well, it sounds that you have done a lot for it. You have been doing a lot to actually make sure the situation's all right. And of course, a little touch about like the deaths that have happened recently. We're so sorry to hear about this, the losses of these parents and teachers. And our thoughts, our prayers are with the families who have lost a loved one or are sick due to COVID right now. And I'm pretty sure you touched over about like Governor Whitmer's executive order about closing the rest of the schools, and I'm pretty sure you covered what does this mean for students during your answer.
Yeah, I think I covered that. I thank you for bringing up the passing of some of our employees. We do have a student that lost. We had 2 students in a school that lost a parent, and we're seeing more examples of obviously people throughout the city passing because of COVID-19, and we're trying the best we can to let faculty, staff, and students and families know when we have an employee that is fallen ill, is a confirmed case, or has passed away. We don't give the individual's name because it's against federal laws called HIPAA to give out the person's identity unless the family agrees to it. We don't do it as a district, but we did commit to sharing when we had confirmed cases or deaths. So it is a sad time for our employees and our families and our parents. And the only thing that has brightened the situation a little bit is to know that a lot of our employees are going extra length to try to engage our students and our families, and we're going to continue to do that. But I called it a tragedy, and it is. A lot of our families have already been vulnerable to sicknesses and diseases because we don't have proper health care in this country. Socioeconomic factors are involved. Issues of race, ethnicity is obviously part of the injustice here. But anytime we have a crisis like this, our most vulnerable populations are most susceptible. And that's what we're seeing right now in Detroit throughout our community. So this is why federal and state elections are so important.
Thank you again. Sorry for people who have lost someone. I know it can be hard. I'm sure our viewers will have a lot of questions. If you're watching right now, please feel free to use the chat on Instagram Live to ask questions to Dr. Vitti. We have moderators watching the chat who will send your questions to us to ask here in a few minutes. We know that the closure of schools and spreading of the virus have placed great emotional strain on our families and students. I know you did mention using like your counselors, finding a way to get in contact with students, but are there conversations on district level of how to utilize school like social workers and psychologists to respond to emotional stress? Are there remote ways to provide mental health support for families and students that can be put into place?
Yes. So we are I know a lot of our students and even our faculty is used to Zoom, obviously what we're using right now, but we have a tool called Teams, Teams. It's a Microsoft tool. And all of our employees and our students will have access to it. And that's why giving a tablet and internet access to all families is going to be important moving forward. But we are going to ask our teachers to reach out to our students and better understand who needs more social emotional support during this crisis. And then individually we'll connect students to guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists, and other contracted services or other individuals that are already connected to students like deans, school culture facilitators. And so we're going to link them into this process as well. And we'll have some more information that we'll share on robocall and text messages for families, for hotlines that they can call or students can call if they're dealing with things at home. I mean, that's the importance of being able to go to school every day, is that if there's something going on in the home where students feel like they can't escape, they have someone at schools that they can talk to. And that's what we want to start back up by April 14th.
All right. Well, on a positive note, we've seen some amazing organizing work happen, and the community really came together to support each other during COVID-19 or this outbreak and school closures. What are some things that have made you hopeful or inspired over the past few weeks since the coronavirus crisis hit Michigan?
Yeah, a number of different things. One, I do think I obviously one won't always agree with every leader, but I think the governor has been out in front, communicating, making difficult decisions, and I think she's been promising. I'm very thankful to our cafeteria workers who have continued to go to work and are working the 17 distribution sites. Just Monday, we gave out over 40,000 meals. Today, Thursday, we gave out over 50,000 meals. So that they continue to go to work is something that's certainly inspiring. And we've had lots of teachers reach out to students individually. Teachers have been using Zoom and other platforms to at least do small instruction with students and continuing to engage them instructionally. And a lot of district staff have been working hard the last 2 weeks to create this new online platform that will be revealed on April 14th to continue learning throughout the break. So there's just been a lot of examples of people that have stepped up despite not having being required to. And I think that's only going to happen more as we shift to an online platform into the latter part of the spring.
All right, so now we're going to open up the floor for some questions. For the viewers that are watching, please understand that we won't be able to answer every single question. Now, Dr. Vitti, you did mention about credits and who exactly, if you were to look at people, who exactly would be the ones, if they were to be failing a class, how would that work? Like, would they
Yeah.
get help back? Would they also get promoted?
So I think the best way to think about it is let's subtract the third and fourth quarter. Uh, and so that obviously equates to the last semester, the second semester. Any credits that were going, the number of credits associated with the second semester would be forgiven for seniors. And so that's the first way of thinking about it. Then we know that there are students in the second semester that were taking extra classes and because they had maybe failed those classes in the past. And so we would have to look at that and not penalize a student that was already taking a class, but obviously wasn't able to finish it, and possibly promote them as well. So we're working on guidelines right now that we're going to share with schools, mainly principals and guidance counselors and some teachers, and then refine those guidelines and then get them out to parents. But I would say we are going to be as forgiving as possible to get as many students to graduate in time. If you're a senior and you were on path to graduate and really all you had to do is pass your classes in the third and fourth quarter, ultimately your semester classes, if you were in that situation, then I think you should assume you're going to graduate. And so I think that's the best way for me to say it, and I'll repeat it. If everything was right as far as your credits and your grades, minus getting a passing grade on your third and fourth quarter classes, culminating with a semester grade, then you're fine. If you were only a couple credits behind, then we probably will work with you to ensure that you graduate with this class. If you were multiple credits behind outside of the second semester, then it's probably likely that you would have to go to summer school if we're able to do that, or start moving to Edgenuity or other forms of maybe gaining credit over the next couple of months or the summer. But we'll provide that guidance to individual students. But I think the majority of seniors should rest easy that if they were where they were supposed to be in this last semester, they'll still graduate.
Another question was, how will the returning of textbooks be? Like, I know that some students borrow textbooks from the school that are required, but how are they going to return those?
Yeah, I think that's part of the process of having students come back to school to get their belongings. So we would do it all at once by school, and probably do it maybe by the alphabet, where certain students would be able to come at certain points of the day. So we wouldn't have everyone show up at once. But that wouldn't come until after the governor lifts the shelter in place, because right now we want students to remain at home and to stay socially isolated as much as possible. So we wouldn't do anything in the near future, but after the governor lifts the shelter in place, my thinking that won't come until maybe May or mid-May. And then once that happens, then we would come up with a plan by individual schools to have students return any books and pick up anything that they left in their lockers or schools.
One last question before I pass it over to Daniel. Is the online learning going to be required?
No, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. But we're trying to do everything we can to keep learning going. There is conversation that if students, for example, were not on the path to graduate or not on the path to be promoted, that this might be a way to turn in assignments to get extra credit to get over that finish line. But we're not confident in saying that, because we know that for a lot of students, they may not have reliable access to the internet or a device, or their home situation is not ideal for learning. So we know we're sensitive to that issue, and we're not going to penalize anyone for that, but we may try to incentivize doing the work in order to help grades that weren't exactly where students wanted them to be before the shutdown, because they didn't know the shutdown was going to happen, and they thought that they would have more time to pick up their grades. So those are things that we're working on. But at the end, we're not going to look to demote or keep students in the same grade next year. For the most part, it's about moving students to the next grade, including graduating.
All right. Well, we have one question about what about those students who are falling behind on credits? Unless you already talked bases about that.
Yeah, our thinking right now is that if you're already behind credits, and you're deeply behind credits, if you're a senior, you're let's say really from a credit point of view, you started the second semester as 11th grader as far as credits, then you probably won't graduate. But if you were just there, just short a couple credits, and it was conceivable that you could have made up those credits the second semester or in the summer, then we'll probably allow that student to graduate. But if you were significantly um, away from where you should be as a 12th grader, then you probably would not graduate. I think that's I think that's the best way to explain it and to think about it. And then for other students that are in lower grades, then we would likely take out the second semester requirement overall so that you wouldn't be behind in the future. So that you wouldn't have to make up the second semester of credits, if you will, if you were in grade 6 through 11th, for example. So it's forgiving what you would have, it's forgiving the credits that you would have obtained the second semester of whatever grade that you're in, from grade 6 through 11.
All right. What's happening with extracurriculars like sports, chess nationals, and etc.?
Yeah, so most of those decisions are going to be made by the Michigan High Schools Athletics Association, not the district. What we are advocating is that the winter sport championships that weren't completed would be able to be completed in the summer, and that the spring sport year would have an abbreviated schedule with a championship in the summer. But that would be dependent on, for example, us going back to some level of normalcy throughout Michigan by June. So if that doesn't happen by June, meaning the shelter in place isn't lifted, that people can go back to work, it's doubtful that we would be able to do the championships for the winter or an abbreviated spring session. The NCAA did make a decision that all athletes would be reclassified, so you don't lose a year. I don't know if the Michigan High School Athletics Association would consider that, but that's something that we would support. So we need clarity from the state on that issue, but we're going to do everything we can to try to play the championships, abbreviated year, and the spring championships. But that's going to be dependent on what the association does and how quickly we can reduce the number of deaths and confirmed cases of COVID-19 as a state. As far as extracurriculars that are school-based, we probably, if there were championship tournaments, then we would apply the same concept possibly over the summer. But if it meant out-of-state travel, unlikely to happen. But if there's anything locally that we could do regarding championships, then we would consider doing that in the summer for chess and other robotics type of championships.
All right. So we know that our teachers work really hard and may end up taking on second jobs. Now they are laid off from these jobs. Will they be paid through the school year or?
So right now, all teachers, all hourly employees have received their full pay. No one has been laid off from the school district. That's district employees and school level employees. And so we're waiting for final announcement from the legislature that the budget that we received at the beginning of the year from a per pupil basis would stay the same. If it does, then there would be no reason to lay anyone off or adjust anyone's salary. So everyone would receive the income that they expected to get throughout the year. We believe that will be the case, and that'll be announced by the legislature on April 7th. But we're waiting for that official announcement. Even if that doesn't happen and there might be a slight reduction in the budget this year, we still believe that we'll be able to keep everyone fully employed at the income level that they expected to get this year based on surplus dollars that we have. So I think for the most part, we should be fine with all employees keeping their jobs and their salaries.
Well, this one, since I'm a senior, how do other seniors who haven't put in their what is it, community service hours or the OCLE, how are they going to be able to turn those forms in, or like at least being able to put that in?
Yeah, we'll have to work with individual schools about that. But I would say we're going, I know there's a lot of stress and anxiety about a lot of these uh, outside requirements, but we're going to do everything we can to forgive those requirements this year based on the reality of the situation. So I think it's just important for students to call out what are those requirements so that that doesn't get lost in everything that's happening. I mean, this conversation is helpful, but you can always email me and put all this in writing. And then that just creates a list for us and for me to work with high school principals on so that these things aren't forgotten in the mix as we try to problem solve through these challenges.
All right, and then one last question, I'll hand it off to Ellie again. So a lot of people are talking about in the chat about senior dues. So is there any brainstorming about just refunding the students yet?
So, so one of two things will happen. Well, one of three things. So it is highly doubtful that we're going to have prom and graduation ceremonies when we intended to have them because of where we are right now with COVID-19 as a state and city, and I would even say nationally. So at best, and we are committed to still having the prom and some of the senior activities by the late summer, fall. I know by fall it becomes harder because folks will be going off to college or starting employment, and it just becomes more complicated. But we are committed to trying the best we can to have prom and graduation ceremonies, even if later and even if everyone can't attend, we'll try to have it. We're going to try to fund everything out of our district pockets so that this year seniors don't have to pay anything. And if we are able to do that, then we'll find a way to give the money back to students and families. So so if we pay, without a doubt, we'll figure out a way to give back the money, whether that's giving cash back to students once the shelter in place is lifted, sending checks to families or students. We'll figure that out. If we can't pay for it as a district, then we would continue to use the fees that were paid to allow those activities to happen. But I'm going to commit to trying to do everything I can for this year's seniors to pay for it as a district and then reimburse everyone because there's been so many other activities that won't be able to happen or haven't happened because of the crisis. So obviously right now, principals, bookkeepers are not in schools in buildings, so those things can't be processed anyway right now. But once they're back in their buildings, which is probably the summer, then we can start processing reimbursement if that's the route we go. But we're not going to take anyone's money.
All right. Since state testing has been suspended for the year, what does that look like for students? Additionally, do you know how that affects SATs, ACTs, and AP testing?
I also saw on the screen a question about third grade reading, so I'll take that one too. So obviously, without students taking MSTEP in third grade, there would be no retention based on the MSTEP score. So that to clarify that, we'll just use regular academic determination of students. Were they on path? Were they near third grade level? And then make that decision part of a teacher decision and parent decision at the third grade level. For other students, there would be no retaking of the MSTEP this year, and I don't think that they would be taking any retake of the PSAT. That's my sense. That could change, but I don't necessarily see that change. So at the end of the day, I don't see that test being taken for rising juniors or rising seniors. The thinking was that the College Board would allow testing to happen in the summer But I think that is evolving as well, just because we don't know how long we'll be in this shutdown mode and the shelter in place. So we'll give out that information when we can. I assume that College Board that runs the SAT will work with districts throughout the country to figure out a way to open up more testing opportunities for those juniors that are going into their senior year, and the sophomores that are going into their junior year.
I've also heard a lot about questions also relating funds when it relates to trips, sports, JROTC, or even driving segments. Like, what would that look like?
Yeah, I would. So I would probably address that the same way that I did sports in general. Is that those things are going to be considered once the shelter in place is lifted. So even if we don't have, we are highly likely not to go back to school. The governor, in her executive order, opened the door up of possibly returning, but I just don't think that's going to happen. But let's say the shelter in place is lifted and people start going back to their jobs. You see people out in the community more, and there's a higher level of social interaction. Then I think we start considering things like driver's ed. We start thinking about spring sports being played, getting ready for fall sports. So but at first the shelter in place has to be lifted. So nothing really can happen outside of school, which are functions related to school, until the shelter in place is lifted. Once that happens, then we'll start looking at extracurricular sports and other activities that would normally take place in the summer.
Another question is, can you tell us a little bit about the support you're giving to ELL students and students who receive special education services at this time?
So right now, there's been some phone calls that have been made by teachers whose students have special needs. Same thing with our English language learners. But I would say by April 14th, there'll be more activity and more engagement. And so our expectation is, if a student had, let's say, a resource teacher that they were working with, or was in a more self-contained classroom, that teacher will be reaching out to you individually to assist with the assignments that are provided after April 14th. So more of that one-on-one small group instruction should be taking place with the resource teacher, just like the resource teacher does during the school year.
Also, there was some questions about how this was going to affect incoming freshmen or leaving seniors.
So I would apply that same concept, that whatever credits were required for the last semester, they would be forgiven or waived. So 8th graders, if you had all your credits, or just about all your credits minus the second semester, then you would be you would graduate from 8th grade and be able to go to 9th grade. So we would apply a lot of that same forgiveness to 8th graders as we would our seniors, our 12th graders.
And you did talk a little bit about being able to possibly provide families with tablets. How would a family be able to contact you if they already have the technology, so that they don't take the technology from someone else? Like, how would they be able to tell you that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that we've been thinking about. We've also been thinking about if and when we do purchase the tablets, how do we give them out to families as well, because of the social distancing reality. So believe it or not, we've thought about hand delivering the tablets to families. We've thought about having students come into their school where they're at, and then giving it out that way. But we haven't thought through yet of a family saying that they don't need the tablet, only because logistically that might be too challenging, and it might just be easier to assume that families need it, even though they may not, because the logistics would be challenging to ensure that everyone would reach back out to us to let us know. And then just phone numbers sometimes are challenging. So precisely, we don't know that yet. We have thought about eliminating the families that don't need it, but that may slow down the distribution process if we do, but not something that we're ruling out right now.
Also, have you heard anything about how colleges are dealing with this? For graduates who were planning on starting college over the summer or this fall, will they be able to? And for juniors who are preparing for next year, will colleges be more lenient knowing they missed some important stuff?
Yeah, I think that everyone, especially in the education community, recognizes that there has to be a lot of forgiveness right now. Um, so I talked to University of Michigan's dean last night, and she said that they were going to be thoughtful about this process. And what I've been reading on social media and seeing on the news is that generally universities would be respectful of the fact that this last semester for many students throughout the country was not a typical academic semester, and that would have to be considered in any time of application process. So I would not worry as an individual student that you're going to be shortchanged because of you lost a semester. I think the vast majority of students throughout the country are facing the same thing. Most schools throughout the country, most schools in Michigan are using this time for enrichment and not required credits. So you may hear about suburban districts doing things online, but very few are requiring it as a credit or a grade. Not to say there aren't individuals, teachers, or schools that might be doing it, but at large, they're not requiring it and issuing credit that way.
All right, I'm gonna pass it back to Daniel.
Well, I think we're coming towards the end of this, if I'm not mistaken. But Dr. Vitti, can you give us a little quick briefest of like, or what is it, quick summarization about student dues, promotion of grades, senior graduation, or whether or not testing is required because the chat.
So you basically you want me to repeat what I've said already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. So at a high level, I'll try to go through everything again. Today the governor stated that we are not going back to school this school year. It would be an extreme shift in the number of confirmed cases and deaths for us to return this school year. So I think everyone probably should be planning on not returning to school. All testing is waived, so no one will be taking the state test, the MSTEP, or the PSAT, the SAT, as far as school accountability. We are going to start to give guidance to schools and parents and students about graduation and promotion. I think the best way to think about this is to say, if you were on path to graduate as a 12th grader minus the second semester, this semester, the third and fourth quarter, if everything was right, you had the right amount of credits and you were on path before the shutdown, then you will graduate. If you're only a couple credits short outside of what we required the second semester, and you could have made those credits up in the last semester or in summer school, will probably end up allowing you to graduate. For grades 6 to 11 and 8th grade, we would be subtracting the second semester, third and fourth quarter, as requirements of credit in order for you to move on to the next grade and not have to make up those credits by the time you're in 12th grade. So you'd be forgiven for those second semester credits. There would be no third grade retention based on the test because we're not taking the test. Graduation ceremonies and prom are likely to be suspended until the shelter in place is lifted. So we're looking at possibly rescheduling the graduation ceremonies and prom in June, July, maybe even August, depending on how quickly society goes back to normal with being able to move around and health concerns being reduced. I'm going to try everything I can to have the district fully pay for all proms and graduation ceremonies and any other student activities that we could still have, so that all student fees are reimbursed to families and students. The only way that those funds would not be reimbursed is if we still need those funds to have the rescheduled prom or graduation ceremonies or other student activities. But we will not keep your money, and I promise that. We'll find a way to send checks or to redistribute funds through cash at schools. We will create a schedule after the shelter in place is lifted for students to get back in their schools, to get into their lockers, to get their belongings, and to turn in books. The online platform and the materials are building off of the curriculum that you've already been using. So if you're in 11th grade, your reading, math, science, and social studies assignments will be off of the books that you have been using this year. There'll be online lessons taped that you can click on a link to see. The assignments will be online. We're going to print out all the assignments. Teachers will give feedback to the assignments, but they're not going to be required for a grade. We are thinking about maybe them being required for extra credit for the following year, or maybe to get upgrades this year, but we're still working on the pros and cons of that. I am going to try to give every family a free tablet and internet access for the next 6 months. We're going to possibly be able to do that by early May, late May, but working out the details of that. And I think that covers everything that you wanted me to review again. I think, unless tell me otherwise, and I'll address it again, but I think I hit most of the points.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you covered all the points, but there is one more small question about just clarifying or like clearing up around diplomas.
Yeah.
Because aren't they usually mailed to people regardless?
Right. So at the actual graduation ceremony, you don't get your actual diploma. It's mailed. So we would use that same process this year.
All right. As organizers, we think it's really important to work hard for our communities, but also to take care of ourselves. I'm sure you've worked really hard and this is really overwhelming right now. So what are you doing right now for self-care?
Yeah, I honestly, some days I do better than others. I've been staying up too late and catching up on emails and writing letters, making phone calls early in the day. But what I've been trying to do is I have been trying to exercise every day, even if that just means playing basketball outside or being with my kids, exercising in the house. I've been also honestly trying to take naps when I can, to just rest and keep my immune system high. And I would say that to all students. I know sometimes we make fun of napping, but napping is important, especially during this time. It's a research-based way to keep your immune system strong. So when I start feeling weak or tired, I try to tell myself, okay, take a 30-minute nap, take an hour nap, and it refreshes me and it builds up my immune system. Drink a lot of water. I know this sounds a bit ridiculous sometimes, but vegetables and fruit are important. But drink water and especially rest. And be careful about interacting with people and then bringing that bacteria, viruses back to homes where there are older people in your house. So this virus is most vulnerable to the elderly or those that have preconditions like diabetes or heart conditions, because the virus attacks the immune system and it doesn't allow the body to fight what it is typically fighting or putting off. So just be respectful of that. I know you're young, you're all strong, but you're carriers and you could negatively affect someone you love.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to do a quick little preference. This is going to be recorded and it's going to be uploaded elsewhere. So for people that keep on coming in and out and accusing us of not looking at chat, I'm calling everyone out. All right? I'm tired. So this will be recorded. Your answers will be answered because they've probably been answered earlier. And also, will you be willing to join us in the future, Dr. Vitti?
Of course, and you both did a great job. I know, trust me, it's hard to lead, and you've done a good job of moderating the conversation. But one thing that I'll tell you as a leader, you can never make everyone happy. Your goal is to be respected, but not always liked. So your goal, be respected, realize that you're not always going to be liked, but thank you for what you're doing. You're not going to make everyone happy.
Why, thank you. That's some wise wisdom. Is there anything else you would like to share with students in DPSCD before we end?
No, all of you are already persistent and strong, and we'll get through this. And I know this has been a big inconvenience. I think at first everyone was excited not to be in school. And as this has gone longer, I think people are eager to get back into school to create normalcy. But I do believe that by the fall, we should be back in the school. Hopefully by the summer, things start to move to normalcy. But please continue to do the enrichment assignments, and at the minimum, read. Just read. Find books that are interesting to you, journal, write through this, and then, years from now, you'll go back and look at your journal and think about the ideas that you had during this time. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care of your families.
Yes, thank you. You too.
All right, we're going to be ending.
Thank you everyone for coming. Because Dr. Vitti obviously didn't have to do this, but he did because he cares about us students. And I would just like to thank him for being here and making this possible, and us as well, because we also worked hard.